The peaceful colony on the planet Varan was like any other human settlement. Life was simple. Children played in the streets, farmers tended to their crops, and the colony's workers kept the machines running smoothly. No one ever expected anything to disturb this calm, safe place. But on this day, that peace was shattered. It started with a strange rumble in the sky. At first, people thought it was just a storm coming in. But then the rumble grew louder, and the sky darkened. The first ship appeared, cutting through the clouds like a shadow. More followed, until the sky was filled with massive, sleek alien ships, all descending toward the colony. Panic hit instantly. People ran in every direction, screaming and shouting. Sirens wailed as colony leaders tried to organize a response, but it was clear that they were too late. The ships hovered overhead, their metallic bodies reflecting the sun's fading light. It was an invasion. But these weren't just any invaders. The ships weren't here to land or engage in combat. They had come with a much more insidious plan. From the ships, strange green smoke began to pour out. It moved like a living thing, swirling down toward the surface of the planet. As it touched the ground, the air grew thick and heavy. People began to cough, their faces twisting in fear. It wasn't just the smoke, it was the terror that filled the air. The fear gas worked quickly. It was designed to attack the mind, breaking down the will of anyone who breathed it in. Within moments, the first wave of the colony's inhabitants were falling to the ground, shaking and crying out in terror. Some saw horrible images, monsters chasing them, loved ones turning against them, horrible events that hadn't even happened yet. Their minds were twisted by the gas, unable to tell what was real and what was just the gas power. On the streets, people screamed, unable to escape their fears. Mothers pulled their children close, trying to shield them from the nightmares the gas was creating. Officers on duty tried to organize evacuations, but even they were not immune. Fear spread like wildfire, infecting everyone, leaving them powerless. The alien ships hovered silently, watching as their plan unfolded perfectly. The invaders had used the fear gas on many other worlds before. They had seen it break civilizations, seen it crumble cities and break armies. No one had ever stood a chance against it. At the center of the panic stood one person, Sergeant Jenna, a soldier who had served through some of the most dangerous missions the galaxy had ever seen. She stood still, eyes focused on the ships above. Unlike the others, Jenna wasn't afraid. Her heart raced with adrenaline, but fear didn't grip her mind. She breathed deeply, her breath steady as the gas filled the air around her. She could feel it, its weight, its power, but she wasn't going to let it break her. Not now, not ever. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself, her hands clenched into fists. "You've been through worse." She had, in fact, faced much worse. Jenna wasn't just any soldier. She was a veteran of wars that no one would ever speak about. She had seen horrors that would turn most people's stomachs. But she had also learned to control her mind, to push back against the fear that the gas was now spreading. She had been trained for this. The gas began to settle across the city, and the first wave of soldiers and civilians collapsed. Some of the officers were able to make it to the emergency shelters, but many were lost in the chaos. Jenna could see it all unfold. Everything was falling apart. And yet, she remained calm. She knew she had to act fast, before the entire colony was destroyed by the fear that gripped its people. Her mind raced as she moved through the panic-stricken streets. The first task was clear: find the command center. The colony's main defense systems were housed there, but they had to be activated before the aliens could deploy ground forces. If they didn't, there was no hope left for the people of Varan. Jenna reached the command center, her hand on the door, but before she could enter, a voice echoed in her ear. "Sergeant Jenna, do you copy?" It was Lieutenant Clark, one of her fellow soldiers. "We need help. The civilians." "I know," Jenna cut him off. "I'm heading to the command center now. Get the civilians into the shelters. Do it now. Don't let the gas break them." She didn't wait for a response. She knew what needed to be done. As she entered the command center, Jenna quickly accessed the system, her fingers flying over the controls. The fear gas was strong, but she wasn't alone in her resistance. The soldiers who had trained with her were equally determined. They knew how to fight back, how to control their fear and stay focused. She could see the alien ships in the sky, waiting. They were ready for the humans to fall apart, to submit to the gas. But that wouldn't happen. Not today. Sergeant Jenna took a deep breath and smiled. The aliens had underestimated humanity's greatest strength, its will. The fear gas might be powerful, but it had no idea what it was up against. Humanity wasn't just going to survive this invasion. They were going to fight back, and they were going to win. The air in the command center was thick with tension, but Sergeant Jenna was focused. She had managed to activate the emergency systems, but it wasn't enough. The fear gas had already taken hold of many of the colony's defenders. Officers who had once been unshakable in their duties were now frozen in terror, unable to move, their faces pale with fright. It was clear the invaders' weapon was powerful, and it was working. But Jenna was still in control. She stood tall, her eyes locked onto the command screen in front of her, her mind racing through options. Time was running out. The longer the gas was allowed to linger, the more it would destroy the minds of those left behind. The colony was moments away from complete collapse. "Clark," Jenna said, her voice firm, "I need those civilians in the shelters now. The gas won't stop until everyone's taken cover." "I'm working on it, Sergeant," Clark replied, his voice shaky but determined. He had always been a reliable soldier, and she knew he wouldn't fail now. But even he had to fight the overwhelming fear creeping into his mind. Jenna took a deep breath, pushing the thoughts of panic out of her head. She needed a plan, something that would give humanity a fighting chance. The fear gas was designed to break the spirit of its victims, to make them submit. But humans had one thing the aliens couldn't understand: resilience. "All right," she muttered to herself, eyes scanning the screen in front of her. She saw the incoming data. Aliens were landing outside the colony walls. The gas had done its job. The fear had torn the minds of the civilian population, leaving them vulnerable. But Jenna wasn't going to let this be the end. She punched in a series of commands, pulling up maps of the colony's defensive perimeter. The shields were down. The aliens had come for that reason, to break humanity's ability to defend itself. But shields could be reactivated. The emergency systems weren't perfect, but they could still give them a fighting chance. "Clark, I'm activating the perimeter defense," Jenna said, not waiting for a reply. "You need to get to the gates. Make sure the civilians are safe. I'm handling this." Her voice was cold, but underneath it, there was a fire, a drive that burned brighter than the gas surrounding them. Jenna had faced impossible odds before. This wasn't her first fight, and it wouldn't be her last. As she turned to face the terminal, she noticed the image of the alien ships above, looming like a shadow over the colony. Each ship was a masterpiece of technology, sleek, dark, and deadly. But even these ships had weaknesses. No vessel was perfect. No force was invincible. Jenna had learned that long ago, in the darkest corners of the galaxy. A beep sounded from the terminal, bringing her attention back to the screen. It was a message from the command center's automated systems: shield reactivation in process. The shields would take time to fully charge, but every second mattered. Jenna's heart pounded in her chest as she stood there, her mind running through calculations. The gas still filled the streets outside, but it wasn't affecting her. She had learned how to push through the mental fog that the gas caused. The invaders had underestimated humanity's will to survive. She turned to Clark, who was still organizing the last group of civilians. "Clark, how much longer?" Jenna asked, her voice strained with urgency. "We've got about half of them in the shelters, Sergeant. The rest are on their way, but the streets are chaos. The gas is messing with everyone's heads," he replied, breathing heavily. Jenna nodded, understanding the difficulty of the situation. It wasn't just the gas, it was the fear of the unknown, the sheer terror that the aliens were pushing into the minds of every human they could reach. But Jenna couldn't afford to dwell on that now. The aliens were close. Too close. "We don't have much time," she said. "The shields will be up soon, but we need to buy ourselves more time. We can't let them breach the perimeter." Jenna moved quickly, her boots clicking on the metal floor of the command center as she raced toward the armory. It wasn't much, just a small section of weapons designed to help defend the colony's most vulnerable areas. But it was enough. She grabbed her pulse rifle and checked the ammo. It wasn't a standard weapon for most of the colony's soldiers. They didn't expect a direct fight. They expected diplomacy, peace, not an invasion. But Jenna had always been prepared for the worst. Her rifle hummed to life as she checked the charge. "Clark, you're with me," Jenna called as she turned back toward the command center's exit. "Right behind you, Sergeant," Clark answered, his voice steadier now. The fear gas might have shaken him, but the soldier inside him was waking up. They couldn't afford to let panic rule. They moved out of the command center, heading for the outer wall of the colony. The fear gas still hung in the air, but Jenna could see the glimmer of hope starting to appear in the eyes of those who were still standing. The streets were quieter now, the screams from earlier giving way to an eerie silence. It was the calm before the storm. The alien ships were descending lower, preparing for the ground assault. Jenna could see them clearly now, their sleek ships casting long shadows over the land. But this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Jenna tightened her grip on her rifle, her gaze hardening as the ships came into view. It was time to show the invaders what humanity was really capable of. They had come to conquer, but they had no idea what kind of storm they had just unleashed. Jenna's pulse rifle felt heavy in her hands, but her resolve was stronger than ever. She and Clark had reached the outer walls of the colony, where the sight of the descending alien ships sent a chill through her. The air was thick with the residual fear gas, but it seemed to have no effect on her. Years of combat had taught her how to fight through anything, and today would be no different. "Clark, get the civilians inside the shelters, now," Jenna commanded, her voice sharp and decisive. Clark nodded, his face determined despite the chaos around them. He sprinted toward the nearest shelter entrance, the image of his silhouette disappearing into the haze of gas. Jenna knew he would do everything in his power to keep the people safe, but she also knew it was up to her to keep the enemy at bay. The alien ships hovered just above the colony's outer wall, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. There were at least a dozen ships, each one bristling with weapons. They were here for one reason: to break humanity's spirit and make them surrender. But that wasn't going to happen today. Jenna took a deep breath and activated the comm system on her wrist. "Command, this is Sergeant Jenna. The shields are nearly up, but we need more time. We're going to have to face them head-on." A voice crackled through the comm. "Understood, Sergeant. But be careful. You're facing more than just soldiers. These aliens are well-armed and relentless. Don't do anything reckless." "Reckless," Jenna said with a smirk. "It's just called fighting back." She cut the comm off before the officer could respond, and in the distance she saw movement. The alien ground troops had begun their descent. They were tall, armored, and their weapons were nothing short of terrifying. But they were just soldiers, and soldiers, no matter how advanced, could be beaten. "Jenna," Clark's voice called out as he reappeared at her side. He had managed to get the last of the civilians to safety. "They're coming. What's the plan?" Jenna's gaze locked onto the approaching forces, her eyes narrowing. "We fight. We give them everything we've got, and then we show them exactly what they're dealing with." Before Clark could ask any more questions, Jenna rushed forward, moving with a swift, calculated purpose. She approached the nearest turret and began activating it. The weapons were meant to slow down an invasion, to buy time, but right now, they were her best option. The turret hummed to life, and Jenna immediately took control, aiming it at the nearest alien soldier. She could feel the tension in the air as the alien soldiers advanced, their guns raised, ready to fire. The fear gas might have taken down most of the colony's defenders, but it hadn't reached her. She was still standing strong, fueled by something more powerful than fear: rage. The first alien soldier dropped to the ground with a sharp cry, his body convulsing as the turret's energy blast pierced his armor. But the others didn't hesitate. They continued forward, undeterred by their fallen comrade. "Clark," Jenna shouted, "get to the secondary turret. We need firepower." Clark immediately ran to the second turret, and the two of them began firing in unison. Each shot from their turrets tore through the alien ranks, sending them scattering in all directions. But they kept advancing. Jenna knew they couldn't hold out forever. Suddenly, the alien leader appeared from behind the group of soldiers. He was taller than the rest, clad in silver armor that shimmered in the light. He raised a hand, and his soldiers stopped, falling back into formation. There was a cold, calculating look in his eyes as he surveyed the humans before him. "You think you can stop us?" His voice boomed, amplified through his armor's comm system. Jenna gritted her teeth, aiming her pulse rifle directly at the leader. "You should have stayed away. This is Earth, and we don't surrender." The alien leader's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, the ground beneath them shook. The shields were coming online. The energy barrier hummed to life, spreading across the entire colony's perimeter. The alien ships paused for a moment, their weapons targeting the newly formed shield, but they weren't expecting what happened next. A roar echoed through the skies as something massive soared toward the alien ships. Jenna's heart skipped a beat as she looked up. From the horizon, humanity's secret weapon had arrived. Massive warships, crafted by humans over the course of years, broke through the atmosphere. The ships were old, yes, but they were equipped with technology so powerful it could level a city with a single shot. These ships had been built for one reason only: revenge. Jenna could hardly believe what she was seeing. The fleet was enormous, far larger than any alien intelligence had predicted. More than a dozen ships filled the sky, each one bristling with advanced weaponry and shields far stronger than anything the invaders had. The alien leader turned pale. His voice, which had been confident moments ago, now faltered. "What is this?" "This," Jenna said, her voice filled with steel, "is the power of humanity. And it's just the beginning." The alien fleet above the colony fired their weapons, but the human ships deflected the blasts with ease, their shields glowing brightly. The sky lit up as the warships opened fire, unleashing waves of energy blasts that shattered the alien ships in seconds. The invaders weren't ready for this kind of force. They thought they were dealing with a defenseless colony, but they had gravely miscalculated. The human fleet didn't stop. They rained destruction down on the alien ships, one after another, until nothing was left but debris floating in space. The fear gas still lingered in the colony, but it no longer mattered. The storm had come, and with it, the power of humanity had been unleashed. Jenna stood tall, watching the destruction unfold. It wasn't over yet, but they had won the first battle. And she knew that no alien force would ever make the mistake of underestimating humanity again. Jenna stood at the base of the command tower, watching as the last remnants of the alien fleet were scattered into space. The battle was far from over, but they had taken the first step in turning the tide. The colony had been hit hard by the fear gas, but humanity's strength was now undeniable. The alien forces had thought they could wipe them out easily. They were wrong. "Sergeant, we need to move." Clark's voice broke through her thoughts. His face was streaked with grime, his expression focused but weary. He had been coordinating with the shelters, ensuring that the survivors were safe. Now his concern was shifting toward the incoming reinforcements. The real challenge was yet to come. "I'm not going anywhere until I know this is truly over," Jenna replied, her gaze fixed on the sky. The warships had cleared the immediate threat, but the alien commander, a being known for its ruthlessness, was still out there. If the leader had any sense of survival, they wouldn't stop until they exacted revenge on humanity. "Then we'll fight, until every last one of them is gone," Clark said firmly. Jenna nodded. She had no doubt they would. Humanity had a history of surviving the impossible, and this would be no different. The comms crackled. A new voice coming through. "Sergeant Jenna, this is command. You've done well holding off the first wave. But it seems the aliens underestimated you. We've detected reinforcements on the way, and they're coming in full force." Jenna clenched her fists. "I know, but we're ready. I'm not waiting around for them to strike first again." Command hesitated. "Sergeant, if they deploy more fear gas, the civilians—" "They won't get the chance," Jenna interrupted, her voice cold with determination. "We're going to hunt them down. Let them feel the full wrath of humanity." With the new orders in mind, Jenna turned to Clark. "Get the civilians into their secondary shelters. This time, we're going on the offense." Clark's eyes hardened, and he nodded. "You got it. But be careful, Jenna." She gave him a small, tight smile. "Careful, when we've got everything to lose. Not a chance." Jenna led her small squad out of the command center, each step echoing through the silent streets of the colony. The fear gas was still in the air, but the shield walls had held strong, preventing the worst of it from spreading further. The enemy's fear tactics hadn't worked on the soldiers, and now they were coming for payback. As they moved toward the outer wall of the colony, Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The aliens hadn't retreated in full force. They were regrouping, preparing for a second wave. And this time, they weren't going to be caught off guard. Jenna had made sure her squad was equipped with the best technology humanity had to offer, but she knew that wasn't going to be enough against the sheer numbers the enemy could bring. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet vibrated. The familiar hum of approaching ships made her spine stiffen. She glanced upward, her eyes scanning the sky. And then she saw it. A massive fleet of alien ships, far larger than the last wave, was heading straight toward them. "Clark." Jenna barked into her comms. "Get the civilians to the shelters. They've brought everything." The response from Clark was swift. "Understood, Sergeant. We're already moving." Jenna's heart raced as the fleet grew closer, their weapons already powered up and ready to fire. They weren't just here for revenge. They were here to finish the job. The aliens had thought fear gas would break humanity. They'd learned that lesson the hard way. But now, they were coming back stronger, determined to crush any remaining resistance. Jenna ordered her team to take cover behind the city's defensive barriers. The first round of fire from the alien fleet hit the shield with a deafening roar, causing the air to crackle with energy. It held for a moment before buckling slightly under the sheer force of the attack. "Ready the counterfire," Jenna shouted. The soldiers around her quickly manned their turrets, setting up defensive weapons that could pierce the alien ship's outer armor. This was going to be their last stand before reinforcements arrived. Jenna had to make sure they held out long enough for the final counterattack. The alien ships above them began to descend, their cannons firing relentlessly, sending blasts of energy that threatened to tear the walls apart. The ground shook as explosions rocked the area. But Jenna's squad didn't flinch. They returned fire with everything they had. The air around them was filled with the sound of gunfire, explosions, and the whine of lasers cutting through the smoke-filled air. The battle had begun in earnest. Alien ships were being torn apart by the barrage of weapons coming from below, but the alien forces kept advancing. They were relentless. "Jenna, they're moving in too fast," one of the soldiers shouted as another blast rocked the ground near them. "We can't hold them off much longer." But Jenna's face was set in grim determination. "We've been fighting this war since the beginning. We will not back down now." With a sharp motion, she gestured toward the sky. "Fire everything you've got." The defensive turrets roared to life, the soldiers unleashing everything they had into the alien ships. For a brief moment, the skies were filled with brilliant flashes of light as weapons collided with the invaders. Then, as the explosions began to subside, there was a lull, a brief silence before the next onslaught. But as Jenna looked up, she saw something unexpected. The alien ships were retreating. "They're retreating. They're pulling back," shouted one of her squadmates. Jenna could hardly believe her eyes. The aliens, despite their overwhelming firepower, were giving up. Why? What had changed? Before she could ask any questions, Clark's voice came through the comms once more. "Sergeant, we've got intel from command. The alien fleet is retreating because they've just received word about another, more powerful fleet." Jenna's heart skipped a beat. She knew what that meant. If the aliens were pulling back, something even worse was on the way. Get ready. This isn't over yet. The retreating alien fleet left behind a battlefield marked with destruction, but Jenna knew this was only the beginning. Her soldiers were weary, their armor scarred, and the sky above still flickered with the remnants of battle. Yet, despite the chaos, there was a strange sense of relief in the air. The aliens had retreated. They had been forced to pull back. But why? Jenna stared at the darkening sky, her mind racing. She had seen this before, in the grim days of the early war. A brief pause in the fighting, a false sense of victory, only to have the enemy strike harder than ever before. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The comms crackled again, Clark's voice coming through loud and clear. "Sergeant Jenna, we got intel. Command's reporting something big. I mean, really big. The aliens pulled back, but they got something much worse on the way. We don't know what it is, but it's terrifying." Jenna's stomach tightened. "How much time do we have?" "Not much. They're going to be here within hours, maybe sooner." "Get the civilians to safety," Jenna ordered without hesitation. "We hold the line for as long as we can. Make sure we've got every last bit of firepower ready. They won't catch us off guard this time." She turned to her squad, all eyes on her, awaiting their next command. The silence in the air was almost oppressive, broken only by the distant rumble of fires still burning in the aftermath of the battle. They knew what was coming, and they were ready to face it. "Get the remaining ammo and supplies," Jenna barked. "We're going to need every weapon we can get our hands on. This time, we don't wait for them to come to us. We go to them." As the hours ticked by, Jenna's squad prepared for the unknown. The civilians were moved to the deeper, more secure bunkers, hidden away from whatever horrors the enemy would unleash. Everyone was on edge. It wasn't just the fear of the unknown. It was the realization that humanity's last line of defense was rapidly approaching the breaking point. Jenna stood at the front of the command center, looking out over the battlefield. The skies were still streaked with the remnants of battle, and the distant hum of alien ships could be heard in the air. But these weren't just any ships. These were larger, more powerful, their weapons more advanced. Something had changed. The aliens had been waiting for this moment, and now they had called upon their true strength. "Sergeant, we're reading something strange," one of the tech officers said, his voice tight with anxiety. "There's a massive energy surge coming from their fleet. They're powering up something, and it's unlike anything we've seen before." "Could it be a new weapon?" Jenna asked, her eyes narrowing as she watched the dark shape of the alien ships getting closer. "It's possible. Whatever it is, it's on a scale we've never encountered. We can't tell exactly what it is, but it's enormous." Jenna exhaled slowly. "Well, we didn't survive this long by running away. We fight, just like we've always done." The storm came suddenly. The sky lit up with an eerie, greenish glow as the alien ships loomed closer. They began to move in a synchronized pattern, unlike anything humanity had seen in their previous battles. It was clear now. They were preparing to launch their ultimate weapon. The ground beneath Jenna's boots trembled as she and her squad made their way to the edge of the colony's defensive perimeter. Their weapons were charged, their bodies tense, and their minds focused. They had no idea what the aliens were planning, but they weren't about to let it happen without a fight. "Hold steady," Jenna muttered to herself, more to calm her nerves than anything. "This is our home. We fight for it." Suddenly, a sharp, terrifying hum filled the air, and then the sky erupted in a blinding flash. A massive beam of energy shot down from the alien fleet, striking the ground in the distance. It hit with the force of a small star, disintegrating everything in its path. The blast sent shockwaves through the air, knocking soldiers off their feet. "Get down," Jenna shouted, but it was too late. The ground shook violently, and another blast came, this one much closer. Buildings collapsed, the ground cracked open, and the colony walls trembled as the force of the attacks sent tremors across the land. Jenna staggered to her feet, her ears ringing from the explosion. Her vision blurred for a moment, but she forced herself to focus. The alien fleet was using an energy weapon that was designed to tear through everything in its path. No building, no soldier, no shelter was safe from it. The walls of the colony had cracked under the pressure, and the alien ships were now descending in full force. They were no longer aiming for the defensive perimeter. They were targeting the heart of the city. The civilians were in danger, and Jenna knew they had no time to waste. "We need to evacuate, now," she barked, but there was no time to spare. The aliens had come prepared to end it all, and this time, they had no intention of letting humanity survive. Jenna looked up at the sky, her eyes burning with determination. The aliens had underestimated humanity before, and they were about to make that mistake again. The storm had arrived, but they hadn't seen the true power of humanity. "No more running," Jenna whispered under her breath, as she prepared to lead her squad into the storm. "Now we fight." End of Part 5. In this part, the true strength of the alien threat is revealed. They unleash a terrifying new weapon that devastates the colony, but Jenna and her squad are not willing to give up. The battle for humanity's survival is far from over, and Jenna leads her team with unwavering resolve into the next chapter of the war. The storm has only begun. The alien ships hung in the sky like predators circling their prey. The destruction they had unleashed was only a fraction of what was coming. Jenna could feel the heat from the blast radiating through the air, and the ground beneath her feet was trembling with the force of their weapons. There was no escaping it, no hiding from the storm that was upon them. Her soldiers were exhausted, but they stood firm. Jenna's heart raced, but she refused to show fear. The aliens thought they had won. They thought humanity would break under the weight of their weapons and tactics. But Jenna knew something they didn't understand. Humanity had been pushed to the edge before. It had been knocked down, beaten, and crushed. But it never stayed down. This time would be no different. "We need more firepower," Jenna said, her voice low and dangerous. "We can't fight this with what we have. Not with these weapons. Not with what the enemy is using." Clark, her second in command, nodded. "What are you thinking, Sergeant?" Jenna took a deep breath. It was a decision that could change everything, if they even had a chance. They had one weapon, one final trump card they had been holding back. But to unleash it, they would need to call upon the very monsters the galaxy feared. "Call it in," Jenna ordered, her voice unwavering. "Now." Clark hesitated for a moment. He knew what that meant. He knew who they would be contacting. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once we make that call, there's no turning back." Jenna nodded, her eyes hard as stone. "We don't have a choice anymore. The storm is coming. If we don't act, humanity will be wiped out. They need to know what happens when you push us too far." Clark nodded grimly and activated the comlink. It was a direct line to humanity's last line of defense, the force that had once been thought too dangerous to be used. An ancient weapon that was feared across the stars. The transmission was brief, but Jenna could feel her blood run cold as the line crackled with static. It wasn't a message of hope. It wasn't a plea for help. It was a warning. A warning to the alien invaders that the worst nightmare humanity could summon was now on its way. "Command confirmed," Clark said after a long pause. It's done. They're on their way. Jenna's eyes narrowed. She didn't know how long it would take them to arrive, but she didn't need to. The monsters they had called would reach the battlefield soon enough. When they did, the aliens would know fear in a way they had never experienced. "We need to hold the line," Jenna said, her voice now a harsh whisper. "We buy time. If we can keep them busy, the reinforcements will arrive. We do not give up. Not now. Not ever." The alien ships above the city seemed to grow larger with every passing second. The sky was black with the sheer number of their warships, and every few moments, the air was filled with the terrifying hum of their weapons charging. Yet despite the overwhelming odds, Jenna stood firm. Her soldiers were at the ready, their weapons trained on the heavens, awaiting the inevitable onslaught. But even as the aliens prepared their next strike, a strange sensation rippled through the air, a shift in the atmosphere, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. It was a feeling unlike anything Jenna had ever felt. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. It wasn't just the sound of approaching ships. It wasn't just the deadly hum of alien weapons. There was something else, something primal. She turned to Clark, her voice tense. "Do you feel that?" He nodded, his expression grim. "It's like a calm before the storm." And then, as if on cue, the ground trembled again. But this time, it wasn't the shockwaves from the alien weapons. It was something else, something far worse. A new sound filled the air, low, rumbling, like the growl of a predator. It started as a faint vibration in the earth beneath them, but quickly grew louder and louder, until it was deafening. It wasn't coming from the sky, but from the ground itself. Jenna's heart raced as the rumbling intensified. What was happening? Above, the alien fleet began to fire once more. The air was filled with the crackling of energy beams, the flashing of explosions. But this time, something was different. The alien ships paused, as if sensing a threat they couldn't see. Something had shifted in the battle, and they weren't ready for what was coming next. Suddenly, the ground split open in front of them, an enormous chasm appearing out of nowhere. And from within that chasm, the monsters Jenna had called upon began to rise. Massive, hulking figures emerged from the depths, their bodies covered in armor-like skin, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Their forms were unlike anything Jenna had ever seen, creatures of pure muscle, towering above her soldiers. They were terrifying, their mere presence enough to send the alien ships into a frenzy. The first of the monsters let out a guttural roar, shaking the very air around them. It charged forward, its massive fists swinging as it tore through the alien ships with ease. Each punch sent shockwaves rippling through the battlefield, obliterating the enemy forces one by one. Jenna could barely contain a smile as she watched the chaos unfold. These were the monsters humanity had kept hidden for centuries. These were the creatures the galaxy feared, and now they were on humanity's side. "Show them what happens when they mess with us," Jenna muttered under her breath. The battle had changed. Now it was humanity's turn to strike back. The monsters tore through the alien forces, and for the first time in the war, the invaders were the ones running. They weren't prepared for this level of destruction. They hadn't even considered the possibility that humanity could summon creatures so powerful, so terrifying, that they could tear through fleets without a second thought. Jenna stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching the chaos unfold with grim satisfaction. The storm had truly arrived, and this time, the aliens would be the ones caught in it. End of Part 6. In this part, humanity's final weapon, the terrifying monsters, are unleashed onto the battlefield. The aliens, who had thought they were unstoppable, are now faced with the true power of humanity. As the monsters tear through the alien forces, the battle takes a dramatic turn, signaling the beginning of the end for the invaders. The storm is now fully unleashed. The battlefield had changed beyond recognition. What had once been a scene of terror and despair for humanity was now a place of hope, as the monstrous forces unleashed by Jenna tore through the alien invaders with relentless fury. The sky, once filled with the alien warships, was now filled with the smoke of destruction and the shattered remnants of the invaders' fleet. Jenna stood tall, her eyes never leaving the chaos unfolding before her. The creatures, monsters that had been locked away for centuries, were wreaking havoc. They were unstoppable, their sheer power unimaginable. With every swipe of their massive fists, they obliterated alien ships, sending them plummeting to the ground in fiery explosions. The ground trembled with each movement, and the once imposing alien fleet now seemed to cower before the might of humanity's unleashed terror. Clark, standing beside Jenna, let out a low whistle as he observed the scene. I didn't think it would be this terrifying. Jenna's eyes were cold, yet filled with purpose. Neither did they. They thought they could just come here and wipe us out. They'd never realize what happens when you push us too far. The alien forces were in complete disarray now. They had underestimated humanity. They had assumed that the fearsome reputation of their fleet would be enough to crush Earth. But they had forgotten one simple truth. Humans didn't back down when they were threatened. They fought with everything they had, even if it meant unleashing monsters from the darkest corners of history. Now, the invaders were learning this lesson the hard way. Above them, the last of the alien warships attempted to flee, their engines straining as they tried to escape the chaos. But it was too late. The monsters were faster, stronger, and more determined. They charged through the sky, grabbing the remaining ships and crushing them with their bare hands. The sound of twisting metal and the cries of the alien soldiers filled the air. As the battle raged on, Jenna's comm suddenly crackled to life. It was an encrypted transmission from command. She immediately switched her communicator on. "This is Sergeant Jenna," she said, her voice steady. "Go ahead." "Sergeant, you've done it. The reinforcements are on their way," came the voice on the other end. "Your call for the monsters. It worked. The aliens are scattering. The fleet is in full retreat." Jenna's lips curled into a faint smile. The tide of battle had turned completely in humanity's favor. The monsters had done their job, but now it was time for the rest of humanity to finish what had been started. "Understood. We'll finish this," Jenna replied, then turned to Clark. "Prepare the troops. It's time to take the fight to their home." As the alien forces continued to crumble under the onslaught, Jenna looked up at the sky. The battle had only been one step. The true test would come when they reached the alien homeworld. The monsters they had unleashed might have tipped the scales in their favor, but the real victory lay in the war to come. The ground shook as the final alien ships were obliterated, leaving only the monsters and the remnants of the alien invaders in their wake. The monsters roared in triumph, but Jenna knew this was only the beginning. "We've won the first battle," Jenna said, her voice cold but triumphant. "But the war isn't over. The aliens are running, but they will regroup. We need to hit them hard before they can recover." Clark nodded, his expression serious. "The fleet's preparing to launch the counteroffensive. We'll take the fight straight to their doorstep." Jenna's gaze hardened. "Good. Let's show them what happens when they pick the wrong fight." The storm had arrived, and humanity was not only surviving, it was winning. The galaxy would never forget what had happened here. The invaders had thought they could simply waltz in and conquer Earth, but they had underestimated humanity. They had underestimated the sheer force of will that humans possessed. And now, the storm had broken. The aliens were not just facing a united Earth, they were facing a force they could never hope to defeat. As the alien ships fled into the distance, Jenna stood tall, watching the aftermath of the battle. The sky was dark, but there was a glimmer of hope in the distance. This was the beginning of humanity's rise. And nothing, not even the most powerful empire in the galaxy, could stop them now. "We don't just survive," Jenna whispered to herself, her voice steady with resolve. "We fight. We win. And we never forget what it means to be human." End of Part 7. In this final part, the alien invaders, once confident in their superiority, are now crushed beneath the unstoppable force of humanity's monsters. With the aliens in full retreat, Jenna leads humanity into a new era of power and unity, ready to take the war to the alien homeworld. The storm has broken, and humanity has shown the galaxy the true cost of underestimating them. The victory is complete, but the war is far from over. The monsters have won the battle, but now, it's time for humanity to claim its place among the stars.